You made the move. Or maybe you're about to. Or maybe you're still in it, showing up, performing, delivering, while something quiet in the background keeps saying, this is not it. Either way, something has shifted and you can't unknow it. Here's what nobody tells you. The landing strip is a little rocky once you come down from the high of accomplishment. There are moments of real excitement, real clarity, like, yes, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And then night comes, and the anxiety rolls in, the what ifs, the what am I actually doing? Not because you made the wrong choice, by the way, but because you're standing in the space between who you were and who you're becoming. Done pretending this is enough, done pushing through, done ignoring the thing that keeps pulling at you. That's exactly where this podcast lives. I'm Laura Dionisio, founder of Lead Intact, and I've been exactly where you are. The corporate success that stopped feeling like success, the leap that was equal parts terrifying and necessary, the messy, non-linear process of building something that actually fits and learning to trust yourself through all of it. This is the pivot point. Real conversations about what's actually happening beneath the surface and what it takes to build a life that feels as good as it looks. Not just the wins, the attempts too. Because I'm not here to romanticize the journey. I'm here to show you what it's really like. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pivot Point podcast. I'm your host, Laura Dionisio, and today's solo episode is going to be a little different than the ones we've had in the past. Today's going to be a little bit more technical, more of the how-to, because this is a request from some of my listeners. I call this type of episode the Pivot Tool, and my goal is to provide this kind of episode the first Wednesday of every month. My hope with this type of episode is that you learn something, whether it's you apply it directly or you decide this is a crock full of shit, but it gets you to start thinking about what tool might work for you, or you try it out for like a week or two and modify it in a way that suits you. Today, we're going to talk about my favorite topic, one that I've talked to a bunch of my friends about, one that I've taught both as part of my corporate career, but also to some business owners as well. And it's how I use Agile, Scrum, and Kanban to my personal life. So if you've heard of Agile, Scrum, or Kanban before, and you're like, oh, why? No, I promise, I'm not as strict about it. There's just certain components about it that I really love. Now, I'm not going to particularly use the specific terminology that they use because they use things like user stories, story points, etc. And it's not the most descriptive if you're not in that space. But the reason I mentioned Agile, Scrum, and Kanban is because if you wanted to look more deeply into the process that I'm going to share today, and again, my process is modified, then you can. All right. So why is this important? And how did I use this? This is important because something I really loved and appreciated about Scrum is the idea of sizing tasks. Now, again, if you are Agile Scrum practitioner, you're like, no, Laura, it's called user stories. Yes, I get it. I acknowledge that that's the technical correct term. And for this podcast episode, I'm going to call it a task because nobody else in day-to-day life says, oh, I've got a user story. So what I love about Scrum is the idea of sizing the tasks and being very specific about what the task is. And let me explain. Have you ever written something on your to-do list and then you look at it later and you're like, I don't even know what that means? Yes, that's why task specificity is important. Now, in Agile Scrum, they have a specific format to address what task specificity means, or I guess to be technical, the user story means. But for me, the way I define it is if I were to write a task on a Post-it and I handed it to somebody else, is it clear to that person what they're supposed to do? Here's an example of a task that is specific. Call dentist to make an appointment. That's specific, right? Like if I were to hand that to a stranger, they're going to know exactly what they're supposed to do and how to do it. Now, here's an example of a task that may seem specific to you at the time, but maybe future you is not going to understand. Or if you try to give this task to, I don't know, like your virtual assistant, or if you're doing this for your personal life to like your kids or your partner or whatever, they're like, I don't know what this means. Okay. Fix kitchen sink. Now, for you, that might be obvious. You're like, fix the kitchen sink because it's broken. But if you were to hand it to a stranger, like, okay, what's broken about it? What exactly about the kitchen sink needs to be fixed? Is it because there's a leak? Is it because the hot water's not working? Is it the cold water? Is it because it makes a weird sound when you do the garbage disposal thing? So this is what I mean by task specificity. Now, I mentioned task sizing. I have a funny story. I was talking to a client, this was many years ago, and we were talking about this process that we're going to talk about today. And she was telling me, she's like, oh man, I can't believe it. I only had 3 things on my to-do list for the week. And I got 2 out of the 3 done, but like, I couldn't get it done. And she was just like really hard on herself. And I asked, okay, tell me more about the task. Okay. Task number 1, email lawyer. And I was like, okay, cool. What's task number 2? Task number 2, email real estate agent. I'm like, okay, cool. Notice those 2 specific, maybe the details of like what needs to be done, not that specific, but it's like specific and relatively the same size in terms of how long it would take and the amount of effort it would require, right? Okay, good, good. Okay, so tell me about the 3rd task, the one that like you felt you just didn't make any headway on. And she was like, 3rd task, move, because she was moving at the time. Now I chuckled and I reflected back to the client. Do you see how emailing real estate agent and email lawyer is relative same size? But when you think about moving, there's so many components to moving, right? Even if we look at the tax specificity, what about the move? Is it that you're actually going to move like you're loading the truck? Is it that you have to rent a truck? Maybe you actually mean hiring a moving company. Is it that you have to pack? Is it that you have to pack the kitchen or pack the bedroom or the living room? Is it that you have to look through your stuff on what to keep and what to donate? So do you see what I mean? This is why task sizing is super important, because while emailing lawyer and emailing real estate agent is a task of a certain size, and those 2 are relatively the same, the task of move actually has probably 50 things under it. Because of course it'll be easier for you to email someone than it is to have the full-on task of moving. And of course, you're not going to necessarily get it done, the moving part right away, because you look at that task and even if you haven't written it down, you know subconsciously that it's a huge effort. And so what I love about the idea of task sizing and task specificity is it really forces you to take a look at the thing that you need to get done and break it down to manageable bite-sized chunks that then don't feel overwhelming to take on, or that then you realize, oh, I don't have to be the one to do every single part of this overall task of moving. And then, okay, so I mentioned another agile methodology called Kanban. And again, I won't go too deep into what that is. I'm just letting you know what it's called so that you can do more research on it if you prefer. So Kanban is a process that's primarily used for things like ID, where there's just like, you get a ticket, you got to resolve it, that kind of thing. And what I like about Kanban is in this workflow, and by workflow, I mean, if you think of each task as having a status, where if it's on your to-do list, it's not yet done. And then you decide to do it, now it's in progress. And then when it's done, then it's done. So that's the workflow. It goes from to do to in progress to done. And what I like about Kanban is that within that workflow, there is a specified maximum of the number of tasks allowed within that workflow. So for example, if I decided, for me, as I'm doing this, that I can only have 10 things within that workflow of to do, in progress, and done, then once I hit 10, I'm done, right? It's not like I have an expectation for myself to do 20 or 100 because I'm like, nope, these are the 10 tasks that I'm planning to do, and that's it. And so with a combination of those 2, I still use this process today. But it was especially helpful for me when I was still in corporate and Lead and Tack was still a side business and I was looking to grow my business, because I have heard over the years a lot of my clients saying, I'm in corporate, but I have this really great idea, or I have this side business at the same time and I just want to grow it, but I can't seem to find the time. And so with this process, it allows you to find the time because you are defining how much time you actually want to dedicate for this thing. So I am going to go through how it works, but first you might be asking, okay, but how do I actually do it? Like, where does it live? There are multiple ways to do it, but I'm going to recommend two. One, you can do the traditional way that Agile Scrum started, which is with Post-its, or if you want a giant whiteboard. So if you have a blank wall where you want to dedicate space for this, or a giant whiteboard, what you need to do is break it down. This is, again, my suggestion, into 4 columns. Now, these columns represent the workflow. You may be saying, wait, Laura, you just said there were 3 before. Let me explain. The first column to the leftmost is basically your never-ending to-do list, because a lot of complaints I heard when first introducing this process to my clients is the reason why I have a never-ending to-do list is because I don't want to forget things. Okay, fine. In Scrum, they call this the backlog. You don't have to use that term. I personally just use the term to do. So name it whatever you want. Leftmost column, your never-ending to-do list. You can even call it never-ending to-do list if you want. And then to the right of that is just to do. Now, here's what I would love for you to decide if you choose to use this process. What is a good working cadence for you? In Scrum, they called this sprint, okay? It's basically like, what is a period of time that you'd like to have like a bounded container where you take the time to really think about what are the tasks I need to get done for this time period, and so that you can also celebrate at the end. When I did it, I did a weekly cadence. Now that I have a virtual assistant for my business, we have a bi-weekly cadence. But it's up to you. For the purposes of this episode, I'm just going to call it a weekly cadence. So going back to the workflow. So again, leftmost column, never ending to-do list. To the right of that, the column is to do for this week. And then to the right of that is in progress. And then rightmost column is done. Now, remember what I said about Kanban, limiting the number of tasks per sprint, or in this case, per week. Decide how many tasks that you want to sign up for the week. I recommend starting 3 to 5. And you might be thinking, I can definitely do like 10. Cool. Start 3 to 5. Here's why. The reason this will work so well is if you feel accomplished and like you're winning, okay, at the end of every sprint or at the end of every week. That's why we're starting low. Because what have you noticed happening? For me, what I've noticed happening is my to-do list grows, like before I did this. And I just feel, even if I just started with, let's say, 3 things on my to-do list, and then by the end of the day, there's like 10 things, and I got the original 3 done, I feel bad about myself, right? And then I'm like, well, fuck this list. I don't want to do it anymore. So that's why I suggest starting 3 to 5, because you want at the end of that week to feel like, hell yeah, I'm amazing. Okay. So here's the process. First, create your board. Again, you can create the board on your wall or whatever. Oh, I forgot to mention, the second way you can create this, and this is what I did, is I used this tool called Trello. And what I love about Trello is that you can use it on your desktop, but you can also have an app on your phone. Now, if you use Trello, just create your own board with the 4 columns that I just talked about. Don't get distracted by the templates, because simplicity is the name of the game. All right. So you have your board, right? That's step number 1. Step number 2, decide what your sprint is. Again, for the purpose of this discussion, I'm just saying a week. So maybe for you, you want it every other week. Maybe you want a month. Doesn't matter, but decide. 3, go ahead and write your shit down on the never-ending to-do list. Everything. You can categorize if you want in terms of like for me, I had categories for work and then I had for personal. It's up to you, but let's just keep it simple for now. List everything in that to-do column, and then decide what your task limit is for the duration of your sprint, right? So let's say my sprint is a week. Again, start with 3 to 5 for the week, right? So that's your task limit. What that means is in that second column, the second from the left column, that's to do for this week, you are not allowed to have more than 5. Okay? Once you start getting into it and you notice you're consistently doing 5, okay, maybe you bump it up to 7, but just start 3 to 5. Now, next step, if you're starting this process on like a Sunday, choose your tasks for that week. So now you're going to look at your never-ending to-do list and you're going to pick 3 from that and you're going to move it to the to-do for this week column. Now, when you look at those 3 to 5 tasks in the to-do for this week column, this is very important. Make sure to assess each task for specificity. Again, like if you just say fix kitchen sink, what does that mean? And for sizing, make sure that they are relatively the same size. Because if you're just like, oh, well, I only have 3 tasks, email real estate agent, email lawyer, and then move. Well, move was really like 20 freaking tasks. So no, you actually had 22, right? So you may notice, and this was for sure me too, you may have to break down some of the tasks, right? And if so, then you go back and you make sure that the to-do for this week only has 3 to 5 tasks. If you, when you go through the exercise of breaking down and making sure they're the same number of tasks, you end up with 10, then move 5 back to the never-ending to-do list, okay? This is very important. And then the next step is to just go and do it. So now every day, this is why I love the in progress. So every day you look at the to-do for this week and you decide, this task is what I'm going to work on today. You move that task to the in progress. And maybe later on, you're like, actually, I want to do this task as well. And then you move that to in progress. Why is this important? So that you can see which of the tasks you are already actively doing. And so that you get motivated to complete them instead of like, I don't know, doing half of the 5 tasks, right? And then this is super, super important, maybe the most important step. At the end of the week, you look at everything in your done column and you freaking celebrate. And you just go, yay, look at me. I'm amazing. And then that's it. You start over again. One thing to note too about Trello and why I love it so much is such a minor detail, but I like things that are motivational. You can choose a background photo for Trello. And I recommend choosing something that motivates you. So for me, I've always had this dream to live in a penthouse here in New York City. So my background photo is as if I am in my penthouse and you can see the view of the Manhattan skyline. And so a friend of mine, when we talked about it, he changed his to a picture of his family because that's his motivation. So that's something to keep in mind as well. All right, that's it for today's Pivot Tool episode. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a review, share this with your friends. And with that, I will see you next time. And please remember to always proceed as if success is inevitable, because it is. If this episode hits something in you, good. That's not an accident. The discomfort you're feeling isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that you're done. Done living in the done waiting for it to magically feel better. Done being really good at a life that doesn't actually fit you anymore. And if good enough stopped being good enough a long time ago, that's exactly who I work with. I'm Laura Dionisio. I'm a coach for high achievers who are done pretending that checking the boxes is enough and are ready to do something about it. If that's you, let's talk. Book a free clarity call at leadintact.com/booking. We'll figure out together what's actually going on and what your next aligned step looks like. And if you're not quite there yet, that's okay too. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Share this with a friend who needs to hear it. You probably already know exactly who that is. And with that, I'll see you next time.